Here we are, chapter 16. We made it all the way to chapter 16, and we're going to be talking about persuasive speeches and basically how to speak to persuade your audience. So let's dive right in. You have several goals of persuasive speaking. We're going to take a look at three of them today. These are the three main goals when you put together your persuasive speech. The first thing you need to do is you need to win over your listeners, and what you're trying to do is win your listeners to a new way of thinking or trying to get them to try something new, either a new way of thinking or a new course of action. Another goal of persuasive speaking is to know your subject thoroughly. Now, this is going to help you in a ton of different ways, but it's going to help you develop an effective strategy to actually persuade your audience. And you're going to be really confident when you go in as you try to persuade your audience to come over to your side or way of thinking. You're going to know it so thoroughly that it's going to build your confidence. And a third goal of persuasive speaking is that you have to maintain a high standard of ethical behavior. Now, we do this across every type of speech that we give, but especially when it comes to persuasive, because a lot of people confuse persuasive for manipulation, and they are two totally different things. Persuasive has a more positive connotation to it, so we want to keep it that way. We want to maintain a high standard of ethical behavior. Persuasive speeches can be categorized in a variety of ways, and we're just only going to take a look at a couple of them for the purposes of this course. One handy scheme labels a persuasive speech by two different objectives. The first is this: to influence someone's way of thinking and to motivate them to action. So these are the two different ways we're kind of look at these. Sometimes these categories, I do want to tell you, they do overlap sometimes, because before you can motivate someone to action, you actually have to influence their thinking about a subject. So they can overlap, but most of the time these can be kept separately. If you're giving a speech to influence thinking, your effort here is to convince people to adopt your position on a particular subject. If some listeners kind of already agree with you, then your purpose is to reinforce what they already believe. So you're either persuading them to come over to your side, or if they are already leaning toward your way of thinking, you just give them more reasons to continue that route of thinking. Here's a sample purpose statement for a speech that is trying to influence thinking: to convince my audience that child geniuses should be permitted to enroll in college classes. Your goal here is to convince them to adopt this idea. Back in my day when I was a teenager, we had a show on television called Doogie Howser. It was kind of cool. There was a child genius who was a doctor, and it was kind of a cool show. But anyway, that's kind of a sample purpose statement for if you're trying to influence someone's way of thinking. But if you're trying to motivate someone to action, you're trying to win people over to your way of thinking, but you're attempting to compel them to actually do something. Your goal is to get them to respond in one or more of these ways. You are trying to get them to start a behavior, such as basically start taking first aid lessons, or maybe you're asking them to continue a behavior, like continue donating blood. If you're doing it, here's the reasons why you need to keep doing it. Or you can motivate someone to stop a behavior. For example, stop spending too much on credit card accounts, or stop smoking. These are all persuasive speeches that motivate to action. Here's a sample purpose statement for motivating to action: to persuade my audience to eat fish as their chief source of protein. Your goal is to change their behavior. When they go home tonight, will they think about, hey, I need to start eating more fish, and will they incorporate that into their diet? So when you're motivating people, you kind of need to think ahead. You need to ask for a precise action. Instead of just hinting or implying, hey, this is a good idea, ask for someone to do something precisely. You can't just give the facts about your topic and assume your listeners are going to deduce what action they should take. You have to tell them exactly what you want them to do. For example, you should say, I urge each of you to take a $20 bill out of your wallet or purse and put it in the donation box on the table as you leave the room. So you've asked for a precise action. The audience knows exactly what you're asking them to do. Will everyone do it? Probably not. But you're asking for a precise action. That is exactly what you need to do. So here's a speech to motivate action. You're trying to get a response, and whenever possible, you want to get your audience to give you a response, even if it's a small token action before listeners leave the room. So listeners who take any kind of an action actually increase their commitment to your cause, even if it's simply raising their hand. But here's some examples of responses you can get. Most cell phones, you need to make sure that audiences are keeping them off and putting them away during your speech. But at the end, you could actually ask them to pull out their phones and type in a certain website or tweet out a certain phrase with this hashtag, or go to this website and volunteer for what you're asking them to do, or to make a phone call. That is one way to get a response. Another thing that you could do is have a petition for them to sign. Let's say you're motivating your audience to support the local dog shelter. Well, have a petition ready for them to sign. Then you're going to get that in front of government officials and lawmakers and get their attention with it. That is a way to motivate action and get a response. A simple show of hands. That seems like a small gesture, right? But science has shown that people who raise their hands actually are more committed to following through with what you say. They have a better chance of doing what you've asked them to do just because they have committed to it by raising their hands, physically doing an action. And maybe it's just as simple as a sign-up sheet for volunteerism. There's a future activity that you have that you need help with, and you've motivated them to help. So put that sign-up sheet out so they can sign it on their way out of the room. Now, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to pressure your listeners. Despite the desirability of whatever you're talking about or getting your audience's action, don't intimidate them, don't manipulate them, don't beg them. This is not good. Okay? And also, don't single out anyone and don't embarrass listeners who actually decline to take action. If you're asking your audience to raise hands and there's 4 or 5 people who do not, don't embarrass them. Don't glare at them in an effort to shame them into doing something, because listeners who feel pressured to do something, they may become so resentful and they're going to totally decline to support your cause simply out of spite. So manipulation and pressure is not good. Now, organizing a speech effectively can enhance your persuasiveness. And so there's several ways that you can choose to organize your upcoming persuasive speech. We're going to take a look at 4 different patterns that are especially effective when you go to organize your persuasive speech. And when we look at the examples in a moment, remember, we're going to be taking just a look at the highlights in the full speech. In the full speech, you're going to have tons of support and tons of material. We're not going over the tons of material now. We're just looking at the skeleton type of organization pattern that you can use. For a persuasive speech, one of the best ones to use is the motivated sequence. And the motivated sequence is basically just a pattern that's really useful when you want to sell a product or a service, or when you really want to mobilize your listeners to take a specific action. Now, the motivated sequence has several steps to it, so let's take a look at them briefly, and then we'll go over them with an example. The first step is attention. You have to grab your audience's attention at the very beginning of your introduction. And from the attention step, you go to the need step. This is where you show your audience that there's a really serious problem that needs some action. Okay, so you grab their attention. There's a serious problem that needs some action. And then you give them some satisfaction. You show them that you can satisfy this need by presenting a solution to them and show them how your solution works. After that, you get into the visualization stage. This is where you kind of paint a picture of your results. Basically, you give them a scenario that can be positive, and that can help listeners visualize the good things when they enact your solution to this problem, or it actually can be the other way. It can be a negative visualization that show them the bad results if your solution is rejected and they don't do the things that you've asked them to do. And of course, the last step in the motivated sequence would be action. Request them to do something. Request an action from them. But be specific. Ask them to sign a petition. Ask them to write a letter. Ask them to sign up to volunteer. So let's look at this in action. Let's take a look at one student's use of a motivated sequence. And for the attention step, the speaker says this: food poisoning is a serious illness that can send you to the hospital, and in some cases, it can actually kill you. Well, that gets my attention, right? Food poisoning can kill me, and this child is upset. And so my heart is kind of wrenched here. Let's talk about food poisoning. For the need step, the speaker says that each year in the U.S., food poisoning causes 82 million illnesses, 335,000 hospitalizations, and 6,000 people actually die from food poisoning alone each year, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The major culprit here, tainted fruits and vegetables. And strawberries are the worst. I had no idea strawberries were the worst, but the student came up with it and researched it. And the contaminants are primarily bacteria from fertilizers and irrigation water. So the student has my attention. There's a need here. And here's the satisfaction step. The speaker says experts at the CDC say that you can eliminate 90% of food poisoning from fruits and vegetables if you engage in thorough rinsing. But the key word here is thorough. Let water run freely over the food while you make sure all sides are exposed to the water. For the visualization step, the speaker says if you rinse fruits and vegetables thoroughly, you have a good chance that you will enjoy the great food and you won't get sick. And in the action step, the speaker says, I challenge you to start today. Make it a standard practice to rinse all fruits and vegetables before you eat them, and make sure that all family members learn of the importance of rinsing. So you know what I do? I would go home, and the first thing I would do is take every piece of vegetable out of my refrigerator, all the fruit, and make sure that I rinse them before I eat them and consume them. This is a motivated sequence. I am now motivated to take action. So hopefully that gives you a good idea about what the motivated sequence looks like. For many audiences, though, the persuasive approach is better suited for this type of organization pattern, the problem and solution. You basically show that a problem exists, and then you present a solution to it. It's especially effective when listeners either don't know that a particular problem exists or they don't realize how serious that problem actually is. And here we have a painting. This is a problem-solution pattern that can be used. This painting is actually called the Home Lesson. This was actually created in the 19th century by a Swiss painter, Albert Anker. And it's among thousands of art masterpieces that have fallen prey to a growing trend in museums throughout the world. That is theft and vandalism. So that's a problem. And how can this problem be solved? Simply. Many museums have little or no surveillance of their valuable artworks and their valuable collections. So the solution to the problem is to basically add security guards, like the one standing on the right of this photo, which was taken at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. I'm looking at this guy. He can take me down. I am not going to mess with the artwork that is there on that wall. So a problem exists. I didn't realize that painting theft was such a huge thing. I've seen it in movies. I didn't know it was really a big thing. But here's the solution to it. Simple security guards, not multi-million-dollar security systems, just a human presence standing in the area. Another organization pattern that you can choose to use for your persuasive is a statement of reasons pattern. This gives reasons for your argument. Okay, for example, let's say that you have 3 reasons for your argument, and you discuss the first reason, and then you transition into the second reason, and obviously comes next the third reason. Now, this can be used for any persuasive speech, but it's really useful when the audience already kind of leans towards your stance on a position anyway. This can just act as a reinforcement or a justification for this leaning that they already have. One student actually did a speech and tried to convince her audience that humans should explore space. And she gave 3 reasons why space exploration is a good idea. Her first reason was that space exploration is a psychological boost for humanity because when we reach the stars, she said, the human spirit is lifted. I can go along with that. The second reason was that space exploration might provide the world with natural resources. The moon, for instance, may someday yield cheap, inexhaustible energy sources for the Earth. Well, that's possible. We've been up there before, and it's possible. And here's the third reason that you may find a little far-fetched, but she went with it anyway. This is actually a photo of the Earth and the Moon. But the speaker's third reason for space exploration was the survival of human beings. That's right, she went there. She said, "We're endangered by nuclear weapons and the possibility of an asteroid slamming into the Earth. We need to have humans elsewhere in the universe to ensure our survival." Sounds a little bit too close to Armageddon for me, but the movie with Bruce Willis. But anyway, yeah, that's her third reason. So she gives three reasons why we should explore space. And, if you already have a positive bent toward that, yes, we should be exploring space, then these may give you a little more credence and justify the reasons why you already believe that. And the last organization pattern we're going to look at today is this thing called comparative advantages. The comparative advantage pattern shows the superiority of one concept or approach over another. In a speech with three main points, you have the first advantage, then you'll talk about the second advantage, and then you'll discuss the third advantage. Let's take a look at what a comparative advantage organization pattern in a persuasive speech would look like. A student actually compared organic fruits and vegetables with non-organic supermarket produce and found that organic has three advantages. The first advantage is the lack of pesticides, because organic produce has not been sprayed with chemicals that are designed to fight weeds and pests, while non-organic supermarket produce often has been doused with pesticides, some of which are harmful if ingested by humans. Remember the tainted fruits and vegetables from the other organizational pattern? The second advantage, according to the speaker, is that organic fruits and vegetables actually taste better than non-organic supermarket varieties. And this is because organic farmers concentrate on flavor, while supermarkets choose fruits and vegetables primarily on the basis of whether they look good and if they have a long shelf life. And then the third advantage the speaker gave was that organic produce is better for the environment because organic farms are environmentally friendly, while non-organic farms use intensive farming methods that erode soil and actually harm wildlife. So as you begin to process where you are going with your persuasive speeches, here are 4 organizational patterns that I encourage you to consider. You will find one of these will fit your methods and the message that you want to get across. So think about using one of these 4 methods and organize your persuasive speech. I hope that you've been thinking about your persuasive speech and what your content will be. Remember, find things that you are extremely interested in or things that you find interesting enough that you feel like researching. Again, this is a longer speech. You want it to go 6 to 8 minutes. You got to have 3 to 5 sources that you use within the body of your speech. 10 PowerPoint slides if you're in class, and if you're in my online class, you will not necessarily have to use 10 PowerPoint slides, but your inclusion of them will be noted if I can see you presenting them to your audience. That's always a great thing. So have fun. We'll see you next time.